In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this animated slideshow using archive photos and a 3D camera. This is building on the last video where we talked about dynamic camera movements. In this video, I want to show you how you can apply that to an actual animation. So what I'm going to do is just right click and create a new composition here. Now I've also supplied all of these images ready for you to download. So you can just basically download those and import them straight in. But I'm just going to drag in my background image here, and then I can just drag in my first image. And these are not black and white when we first start. So we need to make them black and white. A simple way of doing that is just by using the black and white color correction. I can just drag it straight over the top and there you go. We already have black and white. You can go through and adjust any of that to get the exact look that you're after. But I just want to take a few of these layers here and just position them on top of each other. So I'm just going to drag another image in here and also a third image. I'm just going to scale these right down and then just reposition these. Just so we kind of start the animation with something a little bit more interesting here. Now I want to move this one to the back, and then my second image here I also want to move to the back there as well. So we get something that looks like this. I can drag that black and white effect onto all those images, and we just have a nice starting point for our animation. Now I can make all of these 3D. Next, I want to create a camera and a null object, and I want to parent that camera to my null and make that a 3D layer. So now that null controls my camera, and I want to create a keyframe here for my position. I'm going to move across on the timeline, and I just want to basically control the position of this layer. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So we kind of get that movement. Also just want to reset. Just going to move this back a little bit here so that we kind of start somewhere like this. So we kind of get that movement right here at the start. The other thing I want to do is also come down here, and I'm going to add a little bit of the Z rotation. So I want to kind of bring this over here, and then at the start I want to bring this back to 0. So the camera is now twisting as it's zooming into my image, and I can bring this down even further and move it across something like this. I can hit U to bring up all those keyframes, right click on those, and I'm making them easy ease. And that just gives us that nice sort of starting animation. Now we're going to go through and refine the actual movement of the animation. The first stage to any animation is just to lay out your keyframes where you want your major sort of hitting points. The other thing I want to do is maybe also bring this animation in a little bit sooner. So I want to basically bring my animation in a little bit quicker here so that it kind of zooms into my timeline. Now I know there's a little bit of bounce there, and that's okay. We're going to fix that. But then when I get to about here, I'm just going to move across. I want to sort of pan up. And while I'm panning up, I want to bring in my next image. So I'm going to bring another image here and just drag it on top. I can make this image black and white and also make this 3D. And then I can also scale this image and then just rotate this image. So I'm only affecting the image here at the moment. I can zoom in on this image a little bit just to kind of give it that, just to get it into the right position. And what I want to do is if I hit P on the keyboard, I can create a position keyframe for this, and then also create another position keyframe there. And what I can do with this layer is just move it off screen, because I want it to kind of ramp in on our scene like this, sort of drop in. The other thing I can do is add motion blur to this layer, and also for the composition there. So that just adds a little bit of motion blur to that layer, it just makes it a bit smoother. Now with this animation, what I can do is I can start to smooth out these first bits here. So what I can do is just take these, make them, come down to keyframe interpolation and make these continue Bezier. And if I go into the graph editor on these, I can start to smooth out these animations. Now, if we play through that, notice how we're getting this bounce effect here, right? This is happening because of the Bezier. It's trying to smooth out that animation by creating these sort of big curves, and that's creating that bounce movement. So to get rid of that, what we can do is if I select just the position keyframes, I need to come into the keyframe interpolation and make sure this is set to linear. So this is the spatial interpolation, but the temporal interpolation is still continuous Bezier. And what that will do, it'll help get rid of that bouncing effect, right? So it'll make that movement much more precise. Now when I come into the graph editor, I can smooth out this animation. And straight away you can see just how much more of a difference we've got there. I can even drag all of these out to smooth out that whole animation. Just give it a little bit more time. If you're getting any problems like this where you can't see layers, then bring these layers forward. So if they're on top, you just need to stack them in order to see them properly. And then I'm just going through and refining that animation. And it's just about creating a balancing act when doing any of this sort of animation, right? So I'm adding in a new layer. I'm then working through creating new keyframes here, repositioning things, and just keep kind of playing it back to see what's working, right? If it's not working, I can scale things up and down just to make them fit or work better. So it's just a constant balancing act of going through, retiming things until you get the results you're happy with. So as I bring this next one in, what I'm going to do is create a bit of a rotation keyframe here. So I want to basically rotate the camera like this and maybe move the camera over here. And I'm going to bring in my next image, which I can drag on top. I can make black and white, scale this down, make it 3D. Now I need to bring this up so it sits on top of my other layer. I'm going to move this so it fills basically the screen like this, and then just scale this up so it sits in there nicely. And then I want to create a position keyframe for this one and have it animate in from the side of screen, so something like this. I'm also just going to give this a bit of motion blur. So we get this movement as the camera is rotating. We're also getting this next image then slide in. I can also take those layers there and go to the graph editor. The Z rotation, I'm just going to drag down on this, and that's just going to create a much smoother animation there. And for the position, I'm just going to drag up very slightly on this. And that's just going to help smooth out that animation as well at that point. So I'm always going through and refining the position, moving this up and maybe giving a little bit more scale. So as this is moving in, what I want to do is then bring in my next image, or my last image here, which I can put on top, bring this across, make it 3D, Also give it a bit of motion blur. Make this one black and white. I can zoom out here because I just need to reposition this to get it into the right position to start with, and then just bring this forward and rotate this so that it sits in the right position. Scale this up here. So for this last one, it just kind of appears on the screen. I don't have any animation. It's kind of, as the animation zooming in, it just kind of cuts and appears. Now I can come back here at the start and turn on motion blur for all these layers. Now's the point to go through and refine any of those movements. So anything that doesn't look smooth, now's the time to go through and refine any of that in the graph editor. So again, all we have to do is come into the graph editor. Now, if you get a circumstance like this where you've moved your graph and then you get a bit of rotation in one direction and it's back the other, that's because your line is going over this 0 second mark. So this works the opposite way when you're looking at positions. It'll go down under that line. What it means is that this keyframe here has been pushed too far. So you need to drag this back so that that line sits underneath that, and that'll stop that change in direction. To understand more about why that happens and understanding how the graph editor works, definitely check out that video that I made about the graph editor, which is in the private Facebook group. But if some things are not working, then it's good just to delete a keyframe and then maybe look at creating another one and just kind of refining that position. Because it's not always that the keyframes are just in the wrong position. It could be that your movements are too drastic and After Effects is having a hard time trying to smooth out those really erratic movements. So that's one tip you can use there, is just basically delete a keyframe and start again. So that may help you get around that issue if you're also struggling with that. But it does take a little bit of effort to kind of get smooth animations, right? It doesn't just happen inside of After Effects. You kind of have to keep playing around with it. But they're the techniques that I've shown you on how to create this effect. And it will work if you spend time refining that graph editor. But the best way to learn is just to practice. It's like anything, you're not just going to be automatically good at these things. You just have to practice, and eventually you'll start understanding why certain things are happening, and you'll have a better understanding of how to smooth things out. Now, this is quite a difficult subject to get your head around. So to help get your head around this, you can download my original project file, and you can see exactly what I've done in my animations and keyframe positions. And that may help you better understand this effect. That's it for this video. If you have any questions on this video or any of the other videos in this course, then don't hesitate to let me know.